It was something like he was basically like a thirst for to kill or something like that.
As he remembers this, Keith puts his hands in front of his mouth. This is likely an indication of deceit or a desire to conceal information. Additionally, it may indicate that the suspect is feeling nervous or uncomfortable in this current situation. This behavior is thought to be a subconscious attempt to physically block words or thoughts from being revealed.
Your name came up as somebody that we might want to talk to that might know something about this.
Why is that?
Now, I got to tell you straight up, I can't tell you a lot of stuff. I'll tell you what I can. Would you happen to know anything about this body being out in the desert?
I don't know. No, I don't have any idea.
Nick literally laughed in the face of the cop, like he was saying the most outrageous thing ever. By laughing and smiling, Nick believes he's outwitting the authorities, or that he's confident he'll be able to evade punishment. This is also a clear indication of psychopathy or sociopathy, as Nick is not affected by the gravity of the situation. He's busier playing games with the detective than asserting the situation. On June 17, 2017, Hunter Tosh Smith decided to head to Nebraska from Junction City, Oregon. He was going to accept a job offer that would bring him a more stable life. Hunter was just 18 years old, but he had a baby daughter. Life had been a bit hectic for him, and needless to say, he didn't have a steady job or income. Few 18-year-olds do. Hunter said goodbye to his family and claimed that he would take the Greyhound bus there, but he would hitchhike. On June 20th, Hunter texted his friend in Nebraska just to update him. He was traveling from Burns, Oregon to Idaho. The same day, he spoke to his aunt Raquel. Hunter would spend the night with a nice couple. The two had picked him up from Oregon and suggested that he crashed at their place so that he could get a decent meal to eat and have a shower before traveling some more. Raquel thought this was very kind of them, but that was the last time Hunter's loved ones heard from him. By August 4th, Hunter's family finally decided to file a missing persons report after the Nebraska friend called Hunter's mom and told her he still hadn't arrived in Nebraska. So the police began a thorough search for the missing teen, but it took months to get an answer, and it wouldn't be a happy end. On October 21st, some hunters found the remains of a young male in the Bruno Desert in Idaho. The police quickly sent the body for an autopsy, and they retrieved Hunter's DNA from his family home. Sadly, there was a match. The case quickly became headlines across the United States, and the police watched for unusual activity in Idaho. That's when they noticed a few strange Facebook posts written by a certain Nick Vandenberg. He wrote, "This is close to where I live. What the fuck? If it was me, I wouldn't have left him in the desert. Too much risk of Hunter stumbling on a dead body." What the heck? Who LOLs over news like this? And who identifies with a killer as a public joke? Well, as we're about to reveal, Nick Vandenberg was very much responsible for Hunter's death, but he wasn't the only person involved. 3 people would be interrogated in this outrageous case, and the motive behind Hunter's gruesome murder was truly disturbing. First, the police followed leads all the way to a young woman named Montana Reed, Nick's ex-girlfriend. On October 24, 2017, she agreed to a police interview. Montana used to live at Nick's home in the desert.
Halloween night of last year, I moved in, and I was getting a divorce, and so I just, me and my husband were leaving my mom's house. I couldn't live there anymore, so he offered me a place to stay, and so I was meeting his friends and everybody.
Can you hear the tremble in Montana's voice? This indicates fear. She either feels afraid of Nick, is remembering some truly horrible details about him, or is afraid of what might happen when she talks about this with the detectives.
I couldn't think of him hurting somebody like that.
Why do people say that he's violent and is capable of doing that?
Because he went to military. He talks about little stuff from the military, and he's been in a few bar fights.
Montana told the cops that Nick had been in and out of foster care throughout his childhood. Then, in the Marine Corps, he claimed he had to take lives to survive. Whether he was playing the tough guy or telling the truth is unclear. But what is certain is that he'd always had a violent nature, engaging in several bar fights and making a name for himself with his friends. While Montana was staying with Nick, she had another roommate, Nick's friend, Keith Raby.
I couldn't see Keith hurting anybody either. Keith just had a baby, and he's been in jail. He doesn't want to go back at all.
Keith was already on the police's radar when they started the inquiry into Hunter's death. So although Montana confirmed both men had a violent side and a criminal past, she was quite protective of them. She was adamant neither of them could hurt someone, not like Hunter was hurt. So the detective confronted Montana with the reality of the case.
Have you seen the news article that came out about the body that was located?
Yeah, I've seen lots of people post on Facebook from around that area, and that it was right out there where we lived, kind of.
Montana said she knew Nick posted on Facebook about the location of the body, but she didn't believe he was talking seriously. However, when the detective told her Nick had bragged to his friends about taking Hunter's life, she said he wouldn't just brag about it.
He's not necessarily a show-off, I guess. I don't know why he would be talking about something like that if he didn't do it. And if he did, he's not... Oh my gosh, this is so crazy that he's being accused of this.
No one's accusing him yet.
Clearly, Montana is showing signs of distress at this point, but is her distress a result of her realizing she was once this man's partner? Or was she in cahoots with him and mimicking distress as to distract the police?
Point blank, if you knew that he did this, would you tell me?
Of course I would. I don't want to get in trouble for that, for keeping that.
The detective told Montana to stay away from Nick, and Montana kept saying how shocked she was that her ex could do something like this. She was convinced the police would only see her as a victim in this scenario. But the next day, Montana spoke to the police again, and she confessed that right after she promised she wouldn't talk to Nick, she told him all about her chat with the cops. Why would Montana confess to lying to the police the day before?
I'm glad you called me last night, but I still find it strange that you would even care to even stop and talk to Nick after I've disclosed to you that he is suspected in killing somebody. I can't tell you what we know, but I know you would have been living at a house when this happened. And I don't know how you wouldn't know at least something.
The cop pressed Montana to say why both she and Keith moved out of that house in July 2017. Was this connected to Hunter's murder? Montana said Keith was on the run for another crime and Nick didn't want him there, and she moved out after she broke up with Nick. She didn't mention the murder at all, so the detective thought of using one last method.
The truth's gonna set everybody free, okay? I know you know something. I'm looking at you right now, and I know you do.
It worked. Montana broke down in tears.
This
He
is...
was there. I don't want him to be in trouble. I don't want him to go to jail. I don't want to go to jail.
For once, Montana is showing genuine tears. Now she is truly realizing the extent of Nick's crime and the consequences of her helping Nick. She cries over going to jail, not over the death of an innocent 18-year-old. Yep, Nick and Montana were the nice couple that had offered to take Hunter to their place and let him spend the night there. But before going to bed, Nick suggested they go bunny bumping in the desert.
The kid had never went shooting rabbits. We talked about all of that sort of stuff. He had never went hunting really, and he never went shooting rabbits. So the guys were gonna take him out, Keith and Nick.
Keith and Nick left with Hunter, but that night, Keith and Nick came home alone.
What did Nick tell you about this?
All he said was that they took him out shooting and dropped him off in Mountain Home.
But you said you were there. You know this happened. You're in now. You're on the right path.
Judging by her voice, Montana had given up by now. She had let go of her power in the interrogation and given all control to the detective. She couldn't lie anymore, and the detective felt this. So she asked her to call Nick so that the police could listen to the call. Listen to how Nick responds to Montana.
So the police left me a message asking about the body.
They wouldn't say that in the message.
Why would they be asking me?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Do you know anything?
No.
Nick almost asked no, ending on a higher note. This indicates a lack of confidence or simply dishonesty. Nick doesn't even believe himself when he says he doesn't know anything about Hunter's body. But the more questions Montana asked, the more suspicious Nick got.
What happened to the hitchhiker?
I don't know. What's going on?
Because I just want to know. I want to know why they're calling me.
You already know. You know everything I know. So why are you asking me?
The police didn't get a confession from Nick, so they couldn't get a warrant for his arrest just yet. But a few days after interviewing Montana, the cops finally found Keith and brought him over for questioning. Throughout the interrogation, Keith was visibly hostile towards the cops. This was probably because he had 3 warrants out for his arrest in previous crimes. He despised authority and hated that they finally caught up with him. Still, the cops didn't tell him that he would go straight to jail after the interrogation. They played a friendly game to encourage his cooperation during the interrogation. After all, Keith was the big hope when it came to Nick's arrest.
We have been looking for you because you are not a suspect. You are a witness to what happened that day.
At the beginning of the interrogation, Keith is sitting in the figure 4 argumentative position while hiding his genitals. This is likely indicating feelings of vulnerability and fear. This body language suggests that he may be feeling exposed and defensive and is attempting to protect his private areas as a means of self-preservation. Additionally, a suspect's attempt to conceal his genitals may also indicate guilt or shame related to the investigation. Overall, this body language suggests that the suspect may have something to hide and is feeling uneasy about the police questioning.
How long have you known Nick?
So like I said, I've only known him maybe 5 or 6 years
But you grew up in that area out there in
in Grandview, but I don't think Nick really went to school, and he's quite a few years younger than me, so I didn't really hang out with kids that were super young.
Did you notice Keith's gesture here? When a suspect rotates his hands inwardly, it's an indication of deception or an attempt to conceal the truth. This body language can indicate that the person is feeling guilty or uncomfortable about something and is trying to hide it. The action of rotating the hands inwardly can also be a sign of nervousness or anxiety, which can be an indication that Keith is lying or hiding something important. Overall, this is a nonverbal cue that suggests the person is not being entirely truthful and may be hiding something significant. And there's another cue in Keith's words. He's trying to distance himself from Nick, saying that they weren't really friends as kids and that they'd barely known each other for 5 years. 5 years can be a long time, especially if your partner's in crime. But Keith is using words that make it seem like they're not that close. That way, any responsibility Nick has in the murder doesn't fall on Keith. At least that's what he thinks.
It's going to be a good relief for you, I think. Just tell us what happened from the beginning.
Just before telling his story, Keith rubs his face and eyes with both hands. When a suspect covers their face with both hands, it is likely an indication of guilt or shame. This can also be interpreted as an attempt to conceal emotions or hide his identity. Keith may also be attempting to avoid eye contact with the police officers, which can be seen as a sign of dishonesty or deception. Overall, the suspect's body language suggests they may have something to hide and is uncomfortable with this situation. One study, published in the Journal of Applied Social Psychology, found that people who cover their faces with their hands while being questioned by a police officer are more likely to be perceived as guilty. This is thought to be because people associate the act of covering one's face with shame and guilt. So Keith wasn't great at manipulating the police force. If anything, he couldn't hide his discomfort. Keith also closed his legs, which is also a sign of discomfort and desire for privacy. Keith was feeling vulnerable. With 3 warrants for his arrest and a 4th one coming his way, he knew there was nowhere left to run. He was feeling threatened by the detectives.
So Nick had called, I think I was at work or something, and I was gonna get home late. Nick had messaged me and said that he picked up a hitchhiker and he brought him back to the house. But I knew it was going to be a while before I got there.
As he says this, Keith massages his neck, again indicating he's feeling nervous and anxious about this whole situation. Massaging one's neck is also a way to cope with stress, a self-soothing mechanism. But Keith wasn't being honest. Montana had told the police that Keith was already at the house when Nick picked up Hunter. He wasn't with Nick, but he wasn't at work either. Here's where it gets creepy.
Started messaging something like he needed to... And don't quote me on that. These aren't his exact words.
Okay.
It was just in reference. It was something like he had like basically like a thirst to kill or something like that.
What sort of person has a thirst to kill? Who just up and tells their friend they feel an urge to take a life? As he remembers this, Keith puts his hands in front of his mouth. This is likely an indication of deceit or desire to conceal information. Additionally, it may indicate that the suspect is feeling nervous or uncomfortable in the current situation. This behavior is thought to be a subconscious attempt to physically block out words or thoughts from being revealed. One study conducted by researchers at the University of Portsmouth found that individuals who were covering their mouth while lying were more likely to be perceived as untruthful compared to those who didn't use this gesture. Another study, published in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior, found that individuals who covered their mouths while being questioned were more likely to be perceived as guilty compared to those who did not use this gesture. Also, the act of covering one's mouth may also indicate nervousness or discomfort in a given situation. A study published in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior found that individuals who covered their mouths in high-stress situations were more likely to be perceived as anxious or uncomfortable compared to those who did not use this gesture. So again, this isn't working in Keith's favor. Then, Keith flips the bird as he discusses Nick's thirst for blood. The middle finger gesture is a universally recognized symbol of disrespect and defiance. It's often used as a way to express anger or hostility towards someone or something. The study behind the middle finger gesture as a symbol of disrespect and defiance can be traced back to ancient civilizations. In ancient Rome, the gesture was known as indigitus imputicus, or impudent finger. This gesture was considered highly offensive and was often used to insult or mock another person. In more recent times, studies have shown that the symbol has hardly changed. Across most cultures and societies, the middle finger remains a symbol of disrespect. In the context of a police investigation, the suspect's use of this gesture may indicate contempt for Nick. The use of the middle finger gesture in a police investigation may also be analyzed through the lens of social psychology. Researchers found that people who engage in defiant or aggressive behavior, such as using the middle finger gesture, may have the desire to assert their dominance or control over a situation. This may be particularly relevant in the context of a police investigation, where the suspect may feel a sense of powerless or vulnerability. In other words, it could be yet another coping mechanism for the anxious Keith.
And at first, well, throughout the whole night, I thought he was just fucking joking. But then when I showed up at the house, his persona was different.
It wasn't the same Nick that you normally know.
No, it wasn't the same Nick.
It seems plausible that Keith didn't believe Nick's creepy message, but did he get to the house from work, or was he already there?
And there was a hitchhiker there?
Yeah, there was. We started driving and we started shooting rabbits. And then I remember we go up towards like the Bruno Canyon maybe.
That's when Keith had a slip of the tongue.
And like Montana, she was sitting in front of me.
Now the police know Montana had gone shooting with the guys too. She was nowhere near as innocent as she sounded in the interviews. Right after Keith's interrogation, the detectives caught up with Montana for a third time. This time, they cut straight to the chase.
You haven't been honest with me. I know you haven't. I went back, I listened to the calls, and I listened to their interview yesterday. You were there when this happened. I have to put Nick in prison, whether you like it or not. And you're gonna have to help me do that. Will you do that and tell me exactly what happened?
Yeah.
Suddenly, Montana starts ranting.
So I didn't watch it happen. I looked away because I didn't want to watch it. Keith was in the car with me. He was in the back seat.
Finally, Keith and Montana's stories align. They were both witnesses to Nick murdering Hunter, but they didn't participate in the murder.
Nick let the kid get out and go shoot at a rock.
That kid wanted to shoot one of Nick's bigger guns, rifles. So he's firing it and
What's he shooting at?
just rock and nothing. There was no rabbits there.
But unlike Montana, Keith was looking at them when he saw something truly horrifying.
I don't know, I just happened to be watching them. And I seen the kid empty out that gun, and he spun around, and I looked over at Nick and I seen him with his pistol. And it was down at his hip. And it was pointing right towards him. Because the kid was maybe a little bit farther than that door.
Keith remains in a closed position as he remembers all the details, but as he makes eye contact and open gestures towards the wall and door, it becomes clear he's being honest.
And then Nick pulled the trigger and shot him right in the stomach. The kid threw Nick's rifle down, and Nick waited till his gun was empty.
That rifle was empty.
Yeah.
Keith becomes agitated again as he remembers Hunter pleading for his life.
The kid was like screaming, "Why did you do that? Why did you do that? Don't fucking kill me. I have a kid. Don't fucking kill me." And he like fell onto his back, and he was like trying to kick at Nick, because Nick walked up to him.
Nick just walked up to him, looked him in the eye, and shot him 2 more times in the head. You have to be a special kind of person to do this to any person, let alone a young man who is begging you to stop as he has a baby.
Nick walked up to him.
And this kid's saying, "Don't shoot me," don't
Yep.
shoot me, whatever he's saying.
Yep. And Nick puts 2 rounds in his head,
What happened? What did Nick do after he shot him in the head?
looking for casings.
Hmm?
He's looking for his shells
For the pistol?
for the pistol.
And the worst part, while he was doing this, Hunter was still alive.
The kid was still breathing.
Even though he'd been shot in the head?
Yeah, twice. He was still breathing. So Nick point blank shot him again in the face.
When the suspect put his hands on his head, it could indicate a number of things. It could be a sign of guilt or shame, as the individual may be feeling remorse for his actions. It could also be a sign of fear or anxiety, as the individual may be worried about the consequences of his actions. In Keith's case, it could be a sign of vulnerability or hopelessness, as the individual may be feeling overwhelmed by the situation or surrendering into police custody. Then Keith's position changes dramatically as the detectives ask him about the aftermath of the murder.
What did you guys do? I'm saying as a collective, maybe it was all him.
Keith adopted a fetal position, which is a common coping mechanism for dealing with intense emotions. Keith is feeling fear, anxiety, and a high level of adrenaline. He was just put in the same category as Nick. Perhaps he is realizing he might actually be convicted of murder. But such a vulnerable position can also be a manipulative move to elicit sympathy from the interrogators. However, this doesn't seem to be Keith's type.
I'm so fucking like, what the fuck? I don't have a gun, and I can't just pull the trigger on somebody, you know what I mean? I know it wasn't directed towards me. I know I probably should have done something, but I don't know what the fuck to do.
He claims he was completely overwhelmed by the shocking incident. All the while, Nick behaved in a cold and calculated manner, exhibiting a psychopath's behavior.
He's like tearing the fucking kid's clothes off because the kid was in our house. Nick's wanting to take all the clothes off except for his underwear because he sat in our house in the fibers. Nick's a smart fucking dude.
So he stripped him of his clothes?
Yeah. Put it all in the bag and burned them.
Nick was so smart that he managed to implicate Keith in it too.
He says, "Help me drag this body over." It's like, fuck, dude, I don't want to do this. And I did.
This way, Nick ensured that Keith wouldn't turn on him. Then, Nick took Hunter's ID and kept it as a trophy. This was the first indication that Nick was a serial killer in the making. This meant that the police needed to arrest Nick ASAP. People who kill for sport and keeping murder trophies are very likely to kill again. And if the police don't catch them soon, this gives them more confidence to strike again. Before they could end Keith's interrogation, the detectives wanted to grasp a clear motive. Nick may very well be a psychopath, but what drove him to kill Hunter and not someone else?
But it was along the lines of, this kid's a liar, and I'm gonna end it, or I'm gonna end him, or something like that.
Nick had sent Keith messages saying this. This meant 2 things. 1, the murder was premeditated. Nick could be charged with first-degree murder. 2, Keith knew about it and didn't do anything to prevent it. And Montana confirmed the first part in the most worrying way.
I know that after the fact, he would talk about doing it again. That it was a stress relief. Or talk about finding a random person driving down the highway in the middle of Idaho, like on the highway from Idaho to Nevada, and just finding a random person and acting like the car was broke down or something and killing them and driving their car off into the desert and burning it on fire.
Yep, Nick was a serial killer in the making. On October 26th, he was brought in for questioning.
Hey, the reason we wanted to talk to you is because of a body that was found out in the desert.
I heard about that.
Did you notice Nick's position as he listened to the detective? He's moving his hip forward in disagreement, so it is likely that he is attempting to distance himself from the situation and possibly signal that he wants to escape. This body language suggests that he's feeling uncomfortable and may be trying to avoid further questioning or involvement in the police investigation. Nick is feeling defensive and may be attempting to assert his power or control in the situation. And watch this.
Your name came up as somebody that we might want to talk to that might know something about this.
Why is that?
Now, I got to tell you straight up, I can't tell you a lot of stuff. I'll tell you what I can. Would you happen to know anything about this body being out in the desert?
I don't know. No, I don't have any idea.
Nick literally laughed in the face of the cop, like he was saying the most outrageous thing ever. By laughing and smiling, Nick believes he's outwitting the authorities, or that he's confident he'll be able to evade punishment. This is also a clear indication of psychopathy or sociopathy, as Nick is not affected by the gravity of this situation. He's busier playing games with the detective than asserting the situation.
I asked him where he wanted to go, because I'm obviously not going to drive him to Nebraska. And I said, well, if you haven't eaten, if you're hungry, whatever, I can take you home, make dinner. I got to make dinner anyway. And I can bring you back to town tonight or in the morning. Save you that much time. And he said, all right.
Nick calmly talked about how he took Hunter for dinner, then dropped him off at the station after he made a sexual comment about Montana. The detective told Nick he'd heard different endings to the story from Keith in Montana.
The story they told us has a different kind of an ending.
Really?
Yeah. So we want to talk to you about that and see what the ending really is.
Okay.
As he listens to the detective and tries to stay calm, Nick is completely frozen in this position. This indicates that even though he's trying to gain control of the interrogation, he is in a fight or flight mode. In fact, he's in freeze mode, the third option when someone feels in a life and death situation. Studies have shown that people who are feeling guilty or fearful may freeze their body movements in an attempt to conceal their emotions and appear calm. This can be a sign of deception, as the individual may be trying to avoid giving away any incriminating information through their body language. Additionally, research has also found that people who are trying to control their body language in order to avoid detection of their guilt may also exhibit freezing of their body movements. So the detective told him he knew Hunter stayed in the desert that night.
I know that you had some drinks, smoked some weed with him, took him out for a drive, right? But I also know that at the end of the drive, he stayed there. And he stayed there because he was shot. I know that. I also know that he was shot with a 1911 45. Okay, which you had.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. I also know that you shot him.
Nick proceeded to ask for proof, again undermining the detective's authority.
And why would you say that?
Because I know that.
How do you know that?
I have the proof. I have the 45 bullets. I also have witnesses that were out there that said that you did it.
But it was easy. The police had the bullets and 2 witnesses. So Nick said he just shot him out of a reflex, as he thought Hunter was about to shoot him. He even claimed that Hunter had stolen Marine Corps apparel from his home. This is another method often used by psychopaths. Blame the victim and tarnish their image so that their own crime doesn't look so bad.
In 1911?
The one I shot him with is buried in the desert.
Okay. Where at in the desert?
I'm not going to tell you that.
Okay.
You'll never get that from me.
One last show of power from a serial killer that never became serial. Nick was so self-obsessed and ignorant that the next day from prison, he was proudly telling his mother he'd soon be freed. He believed that because he was never read his Miranda rights, nothing he'd said would count. But the police had asked Nick to come voluntarily to the station, and he did. In this context, there's no requirement for the Miranda rights. Prior to his trial, Montana put the last nail in the coffin.
He talked about doing that. He talked about paying up more hitchhikers. He told me and Keith that it was our turn next. He wanted a little community of little killers. And I went along with it because I didn't know what else to do.
Montana added that Nick had bragged about killing for cash and taking lives in the army, but the police discredited both stories after they did a check on him. Nick was lying. He wanted to be a prolific serial killer. Luckily, He was arrested before he could become one. Well, all three were arrested. In August 2019, Nick was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Montana pleaded guilty to criminal conspiracy and failure to notify authorities of a death. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with parole after 5 years. Keith pleaded guilty to accessory to first-degree murder, evidence destruction, and failure to notify authorities. He will serve 26 years, with parole after 11 years. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this case. And before you go, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. On to next time.